All right, Doug, good morning. Today I'd like to talk about financial and economic warfare. That seems to be a new tool of the state that maybe they haven't really had before, but we see these things emerging with especially what's going on in Canada. What have you seen? What do you think?
I think that computers are definitely our frenemy. Uh, in some ways, they've been excellent and liberating. I'm looking at this from the point of view of personal freedom. I mean, there's lots of other points of view to look at it at economic development and so forth. Uh, but actually, in all these areas, the computer is our is our frenemy because people that have contributed money to the truckers, their names have been disclosed.
Yeah.
And, of course, the next thing that's going to happen is Revenue Canada is going to probably be all over them to punish them. And, the kind of people that are against the truckers will find some way to punish them. So yeah, this is much more effective than sending the RCMP in with truncheons to
Right.
yeah.
Exactly. It's like it's a sort of a silent covert weapon, really. And and it's coming from multiple fronts. I don't know who hacked Give Send Go and released the data, but the data is out there. And like here's one person I found put together this essentially a heat map showing all the different zip codes where the donations came from. They break
Hmm.
it down by state and province, and there was a big portion of it that came from the U.S. So they're looking at like international financing of domestic terrorism.
Yeah.
That's the way they could frame that stuff. So, but this is all those people have been doxxed. Their private information has all been, is all out there. I know that um, uh, the CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, is reaching out to individual donors, asking them to explain themselves. What was their motivation behind it? It's it's interesting. It's a whole new thing.
Well, the question is, how can right-thinking people counterattack? What do we do about this, if anything? Is it possible to do anything about it, actually?
Well, there is the thing that you can do. One would think is that you can use crypto. I mean, I think that this is probably good for crypto, and that it's like it's more private at least. But it's there's let me see if I can find this. Sorry, let me find this note here that says that there were something like 36 different crypto wallets that have been seized, or not seized, they haven't been seized. 36 crypto wallets that have been identified as being connected to funding the rioters, or the rioters. I'm using their language. What's going on with me?
Of course, well, the first thing you do is you capture the language, and
Exactly.
they've done that too.
They're doing it in my head. Even I got to get it out of my head. These patriotic Canadians, any money donations connected to them, they've sort of blacklisted these 34, 36 wallets so that they, the basically the exchanges in Canada could not work with them. So even that's not a perfect solution either. And these things, by the way, are really things that that the hack of the Give Send Go isn't even something that is done by the state. And maybe the state actually did it and they released it possibly, but this is just these are just antagonists essentially that don't like what's happening, support the state, and want are basically hacking on behalf of the state, which is you know bad. The state alone is bad enough, but there's some other things that you see out there. And I mean, if you see the speech from the deputy prime minister and minister of finance, was pretty shocking, and I'd encourage everybody to go check that out, because basically, what she says is that anybody who is supporting these truckers, receiving money or sending money, essentially is supporting or violating their anti-money laundering and terrorist financing rules.
Hmm. Well, I understand this may or may not be correct. I think it is correct that she was a talking head on CNN or MSNBC, and she was very involved in the American media. I presume she's probably a dual American Canadian citizen, but so I suspect that's true. But the thing that disturbs me about it is that it's further indication of how intermingled the personnel in government and the media are. They support each other. It's a revolving door between, well, not just big corporations and government, but the media and government, and actually academia and government too. So they all just reinforce each other. So
Right.
once again, you got to ask yourself, what can we do about it? I mean, we can talk, I mean, and convince people, but we're fighting an uphill battle because generations of people throughout the Western world have gone to government schools and been indoctrinated overtly and subtly to believe that the right thing to do is to support the state and support these horrible things the state is doing. So I don't know how we overcome this at this point. In fact, the Canadian truckers, what can they do now that they're being attacked financially as well as physically? Well, they could say, well, we're not going to pay our taxes this year. Okay, I think that would be good, but are there enough of them to seriously inconvenience the government? And how's the average person gonna? Oh, you can't. Hey, I have to pay my taxes. You have to pay your taxes. Can you get everybody to not pay their taxes?
Yeah.
During the 60s, during the Vietnam War, there was a meme. Suppose they gave a war and nobody came.
Yeah.
And that was a reasonably successful meme because lots of people decided, no, I'm just not going. But I always thought, well, suppose they gave a tax and nobody paid.
Exactly.
But
Well, I think
that's even more dangerous than
well,
not.
it is more dangerous, but I mean the escalation by this is pretty dramatic, and you almost wonder like if they're trying to push people into a corner to cause it to turn kinetic in some way. But I think the only way we can start to find a way out of any of this is to fully acknowledge what's actually happening. I think, that's why I kind of harp on the problems, the doom casting stuff, because I feel like if people don't actually understand what's actually happening, they feel like you can, I don't know, that normalcy or reasonableness will somehow eventually come out ahead. And that's not the case of any of this we've seen. And I saw this tweet yesterday that I thought was really interesting and useful and summed this up pretty well. And it says, first, they banned a news story that could have swung the election, and that was the Hunter Biden laptop. So they banned the story. Then they banned a sitting president from speaking in the new public square on Twitter, banning Trump. Now they're freezing your bank accounts for supporting protesters. And he says, food and electricity conditional on compliance when?
Well, that's a very good point. And of course, that little tweet that you just sent us, obviously a takeoff on Martin Niemöller, who was a Protestant pastor of some type during the days of Nazi Germany. What did he say? He said, first they came for the communists, but I wasn't a communist. So, and then they came for blah, blah, blah. And then they came for me. And by that time, there was nobody that was around anymore that could help me. Of course, it turns out that Niemöller wasn't the stand-up guy. At least I've read this. That everybody thinks he was. Turned out that he was a collaborator in the end. I mean,
Wow.
Correct me if I'm wrong, anybody out there that's more familiar with the story, but it's not quite as sanitary as we'd like from his famous phrase. Well, what are you going to do? I mean, when are you going to stand up against these people, and how are you going to stand up against them? That's a good question. Exactly. How do you do it?
Well, I mean, what they've been doing so far is working. Clearly, it's definitely, I think it's working in that it's created such a complex set of problems for them to try and address that, that they had to go to this length, basically declaring martial law, a form of martial law in Canada, to try and get a new tool set to deal with it. Basically a tool set that allowed them to, violate the existing laws of Canada in order for, for them to deal with this. So, but as it goes down this part, I feel like those people, as they get backed further into a corner, all they can do is escalate. I mean, all they can do is, maybe a general strike in Canada. I don't know. I mean, they have a lot of support in Canada, so more people coming out. I mean, I
But
don't
then
know.
it comes down to finances again, because all these truckers in particular are people that would join them. Most of them have mortgages to pay or rent to pay and food to buy, and they shut down their financial accounts. Now, what are you going to do? So it's tough. This is really very much like what Solzhenitsyn was writing about in Gulag Archipelago, which, it's a huge 3-volume book. I haven't read it. I've just read a condensation of Gulag Archipelago into one book. And it is absolutely a terrifying book. It is actually more terrifying than anything somebody like Stephen King has written. It's just
100%.
it's really well written and really scary. But the one thing that I remember out of Gulag Archipelago that Solzhenitsyn is talking about is that when they were all together in the prison camp, and it was about as horrible as it could be, they were talking to each other, these guys, and they say, yeah, when the NKVD was walking up the stairs, we should have grabbed a pipe or a hammer or anything and attacked them right on the spot, because we couldn't be possibly worse off for having done that than sitting here dying in this gulag. And they all agreed. But, when the guy's walking up the stairs, well, chances are you're just gonna, you can't
Yeah.
fight them. I mean, not organized. They'll bring out 100 more armed
Yep.
operatives.
Well,
It's
but I think that one of the biggest reasons why that happens is because, and he talks about this. He says that everyone expects that they know they didn't do anything wrong. So like when they come, they're going to be they expect they'll be treated reasonably somehow, and that the
yeah.
people who were snatched the night before probably really were doing something wrong, and probably and if they didn't, then it'll get worked out. Like there's this expectation that the tyranny will be reasonable at some level, and it doesn't. I mean, you don't see that happening.
No, and we have to realize that people, I mean, basic human beings, are the same across time and space, and the same, a standard distribution, really, in, I'd say, most societies. So you've got the same kind of people that were in Soviet Russia and Nazi Germany and lots of other places. You got the same people in Canada and the US, and they have the same thought processes, and they'll wheedle themselves into the same positions. So sure, it could happen. It's happening right before our very eyes, and it's really, really disturbing.
Yeah, and I think it's a preview for what is coming next. I mean, I think that you know the this ratcheting up of financial controls over the population, it just seems to be the inevitable outcome of all of this. And it's like what's been talked about for years. The social credit score stuff in China, and how repressive that can be, but that is certainly coming here in one form or another. And I think we get a little preview of it as we see people's bank accounts being shut down because they're engaging in wrong think or wrong behavior, even if it's not violent at all.
Yeah, and even if even if you go around setting up your own parallel society, get around the bank stuff by using gold coins and silver coins to transact business with each other. Steve Hawley in internationalman.com yesterday, a couple of days ago, had a great article about will they confiscate gold again? Now, most people, including myself, frankly, have always poo-pooed that idea. No, they're not going to do it for all kinds of reasons. But then the article points out, yeah, they very well could do it for all kinds of reasons. And, things are getting bad enough that you got to consider that. And these governments are bankrupt enough that Yeah, they'll do almost anything to maintain themselves because the prime directive of any entity, whether it's an amoeba or a government or anything in between, is survive. And if the government needs assets and revenue to survive, yeah, sure. They'll find
Hmm.
some way to confiscate everybody's gold, or for that matter, silver, for the good of all. And most people will just roll over like whipped dogs. When I've been saying this in the past, I felt it was theoretical, but what's happening in Canada, uh, and now with Jacobins, with actual Bolsheviks in charge in Washington D.C., it's happening here. Well, the other day, um, you sent me something. I don't know if you still have it, and you can put it up on the screen from the ATF, right?
Oh
Valentine's
yeah,
Day.
yeah, yeah. Hold on, give me a second. I'll bring that up. Yeah, the ATF is. I have an interesting sense of humor. It seems like at this point. Yeah, let me bring it up here.
Well, the guy that the Bidenistas appointed to run the ATF, I mean, this guy is a maniacal criminal. I mean, he really is. I'm just saying, when I read his bio when he was appointed to run the ATF, I said, this guy's going to be big trouble, really bad news. And here's an indication of it. Look at this. It's just
Yeah,
incredible.
this is what he sent out for Valentine's Day. Essentially, it's hard to believe. I didn't even believe this was real actually when I first got it. So I had to go to their Twitter account and look myself, and it's not a joke. Basically, it says for Valentine's Day, it can still be fun even if you broke up. It says, do you have information about a former or current partner involved in illegal gun activity? Let us know, and we'll make sure it's a Valentine's Day to remember.
Yeah.
Essentially, they're saying call the cops on your ex.
Yeah. Well, yeah, maybe even a SWAT team. I mean, these people are, and of course, uh, the state's so out of control now that this is a great way to run a prank, is to call a SWAT team in on somebody alleging all kinds of things on the mail. And, you know,
Exactly.
this is what happens when you have a powerful state. I mean, people will use it in all kinds of ways, but this is shocking. I mean, one more reason perhaps to not try to reach out to someone from a male reaching out to a female, because you don't know if you're dealing with a psycho bitch who will use this among many other things to get at you later.
Right, exactly. It has no, this has no relationship to whether or not you actually have illegal guns or not. But I mean, how many ex-boyfriends or girlfriends have a grudge against their former partner? I mean, how many millions of these people exist in the country? I mean, there's got to be so many of them. So encouraging people to use the power of the state to go after their ex is just, it's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, yeah. This started with the "see something, say something" thing that the baby Bush started. And it's
Mhm.
really what police states have always done: turn in your neighbor.
Yeah, and
It's
then but
all
here
really.
here's a tweet they sent out a couple days later though, that the ATF has a new merch store though, and you can go buy a polo shirt with their logo and all of that. It's available for sale. I don't know who they think is going to want to buy some ATF merchandise, but
Got to be really,
this is real.
it's got to be a really sick person. But on the other hand, I don't know how I got this, but when I had a firearms license, somehow I think the ATF sent me. Uh, what is it? Was it ATF or DEA? Anyway, I have it in an obscure. You haven't seen it here at the house. It's a SWAT team, three guys with their battering ram and two guys on the side. They're all, masked in Gestapo type gear and helmets and all this type of thing, breaking down a door. Okay. And then on the opposite wall, this is in a little ante room. I'll show it to you. I've got a picture of Uncle Scrooge, and who's one of the most heroic characters in literature, where he's had where he's having somebody shooting a shotgun at him, done the way that a Donald Duck cartoon would be when, it was accepted. Everybody had shotguns, and if you shot it at somebody, Uncle Scrooge wouldn't have called the ATF or
No.
DEA, God knows what other awful agency. I'll show them to you. They're in juxtaposition to each other then and now.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. Well, so this obviously this targeted financial escalation is happening, and I think the end state of it all, I think, gets to this ESG stuff or this, credit score stuff, social credit score. Now, let me show that a little website I found about this the other day that I shared with you. Essentially, it's a tool for how to calculate your individual ESG score. And yeah, why I sent it to you, Doug. What did you think?
Yeah, I was shocked and disgusted and disturbed because, of course, this idea of ESG scores has been worming its way into society now for a few years. But this is for individuals. This is for investors. And it's clear that everybody is going to eventually have an individual ESG score. And it points out that if you have an account with Merrill Lynch, don't, they on your, apparently it says here, I think, on your monthly statement, they give you your ESG score based upon what they know about you. And it's not just the stocks that you're buying and things of that nature, it's whatever else they know about you. Like
Right.
how much you drive. And of course, since cars are all hooked up to the internet now, especially electronic cars, you can be totally hooked up. How much you drive, where you're going. If you buy a candy bar, which I guess you're not supposed to do, or a soft drink. I mean, God forbid Bloomberg would find out about that. I mean, so ESG score for individuals. I mean, this is actually China's social credit system.
It really is, and it talks about your purchase history as well as your sales history. That has effect. The charities you support, like if you support the truckers, not good. If you support BLM, that's good.
Yeah, charities you support, and it doesn't end there. I despise this whole movement towards ESG and diversity, inclusion, and there's another
equity,
right? So much that whenever I have to make a moral decision or speak in public, I don't ask myself, how will it affect my ESG or whatever it is score? In fact, I don't ask myself, what would Jesus do? I ask myself, what would Al Swearingen do? Or what would Rick Suarez do? Everybody, this is a good tip. Everybody ought to watch Rick and Morty. Best thing that's been on TV since Deadwood.
I agree.
You ever watch it?
Yeah, it's hilarious. I love it. Yeah,
it's a work of genius. It's much more hardcore than South Park.
Yeah, you can get away with a lot in animation, though. Strangely, you could never work if it wasn't a cartoon character saying the things that Rick says.
Yeah, that's right. But whoever's writing that, Rick is very funny. He's very droll, and basically very sound, I think, in his view on things. But Rick is a nihilist, of course.
Yeah.
But
no one's perfect.
Yeah, it is. Anyway.
So yes. So yeah, a whole bunch of different categories. So here's some bullet points. Says a list of your investments is a factor in it. So if you're investing in good companies or bad companies, a general calculation of how many miles you travel via car and public transport, how much energy you use, your cryptocurrency profile. I'm not sure what that means. Your food consumption numbers, your organic and environmental effort profile. That's very interesting. But it's fundamentally, they want it tied to behavior. They do the right things, get some benefits. Do the wrong things, things get more expensive and more difficult for you.
Well, who are the warm bodies in back of ESG in general? And this incredibly stupid and invasive thing that is being sent out in particular. I mean, who's funding these people? Where are they getting their money to send this out to people?
Well, one of the things I think, Doug, I mean, listen, there's a huge economic opportunity in, in creating these new regulated industries. I mean, and like the carbon streaming stuff, for instance. I mean, it's a giant boondoggle, like a huge amount of money. I mean, many, many, many billions of dollars that can be made by creating those things. So I think there's a huge incentive for that. I mean, anytime you can, lay this regulatory dragnet essentially on broad swaths of the economy, the people who on, someone is going to get rich off of it, off of the
Mhm.
punishment of others.
That's so true. I mean, like, one of my very largest investments, actually, it's gone up so much, it is my largest investment, is in Carbon Streaming
Mm.
Corporation, which has been a huge winner so far. I absolutely despise the idea from absolutely every point of view, but sometimes you have to put on your speculator's hat, and sometimes you have to put on your philosopher's hat, and sometimes they're at odds with each other. Not an ideal situation, of course, but
Yeah. But I think that, the incentives are so massive to to roll this thing out, whether it's Wall Street. I think it's hugely advantageous to roll this stuff out. And I think for governments who want more control over the behavior of the populace, these things are a huge winner. So I think
yeah,
there's a lot of incentive.
exactly. If you change people's way of thinking and make them think this is what you ought to do and be a good little lamb, God, it is so much easier and cheaper and more effective than beating them with truncheons.
Right.
It's
Well, yeah, and the little behavior, the one of the most insidious things that's probably happened in the last couple of years is the mass rollout of these behavioral economics ideas. The little carrot and stick stuff to maneuver the population to corral really the population into believing certain things and to engaging in certain activities. And it's they have in the UK they have a group called the Nudge Unit, and the nudge unit is really designed to try and come up with strategies, communication strategies for playing on the behavioral economics type of decisions that people make. And it's really effective. It's much more effective than getting kinetic with people, so.
yeah. Well, see, but I just hate the idea of being a whipped dog so much that for many years, I mean, whenever I've had interaction with a minion of the state, uh, oftentimes immigration officials coming into the US, I mean, it's always been, because I made it that way, an unpleasant encounter where I went out of my way to ruin their day.
To
Okay.
antagonize them.
Yeah, and I've been sent to secondary a couple of times because he says, "Oh, yeah, fuck me. Well, fuck you." And you go off to secondary and you have to do the drill again. But of course, unless I plant something on you, I've always been okay. But I just felt that a little bit of guerrilla warfare in that way, you know, uh, counter psychological warfare against these horrible people that would work for the state, going through other people's underwear and everything. It's important, but most people say, "Oh, I don't want to get in trouble, or maybe I'll get a black mark on my record." Well, fortunately, this is one advantage. I mean, this is one advantage to having a little bit of money and living in some place like where we are, where they don't even care you exist.
No.
It really helps.
Does help. It does help, and I would say that it was really in my reading of taking it back to what you mentioned earlier with reading Solzhenitsyn last year that made me put me over the edge with you just got to get out of here. Like being in the U.S. is a bad idea. It's just going to continue to ramp up, and there's the police force is strong, the state is powerful. If eventually the eye of Sauron will fall on you, and when it does, there's really
Yeah.
nothing you can do.
Yeah. And we know for a fact it's going to get worse over the next 3 years while, these Bolsheviks are in charge in Washington because they are working overtime to do everything they can while they're in office. And I think are they going to win in the 22 elections or the 24 elections? Well, any way that they can keep themselves in office, they're going to, and spending these trillions of dollars going towards all kinds of horrible organizations, which is where all that money is going. They're going to do everything they can. It's like Argentina. You'd think that the Argentines wouldn't be so stupid to only elect, but then re-elect the Kirchners and the rest of these horrible politicians. But yes, they do. And voters do it everywhere. And I know the system in Canada is a little bit different, and it was a fluke that Trudeau got in, but he got in, which shows that he has a lot of support. So the trend is in motion, and I don't know what's going to turn the trend around. It's like when we were talking about peasant revolts the other day. 95% of peasant revolts throughout history are total disasters with mass casualties on the part of the revolters. And most people don't even know that there were these peasant revolts because they're quashed. I mean, the powers that be don't even want to talk about them because it might give other people ideas.
Right, exactly. And I think, what you see, well, the thing is that it seems to me that things will get worse over the next 3 years, no matter what happens, as you said, in part because politically the Jacobins are in charge. But even if, let's say, they became all of a sudden really benign, the economic realities, the economic seeds that have been sown will, they will come to fruition. And I think that life is going to be dramatically harder regardless, because of the economic realities are going to catch up. It's like physics. You can't avoid gravity for long, eventually it's going to bring it down. And I think that pain is still coming, and we haven't even begun to really reckon with that pain yet.
Yeah, exactly. It's, you can ignore the reality, but reality is not going to ignore you. And
yeah. One other thing I just want to say is, even if you have to, people have to understand it's a rigged game. This is a rigged game. And if Canada doesn't make that clear, then I don't know what would. If you're paying attention, Canada should make that clear. Essentially, if you assume laws actually matter and the rule of law actually matters, you're not paying attention. Because as soon as when the law serves the state, the laws are followed. When the law doesn't serve the state, they embrace emergency powers and do whatever they want. That's what they do. That's what they've done the last 2 years. And we're to see a constant escalation of this.
Yeah. And if you scratch the surface when talking to your friends or neighbors or relatives, you'll find that most of them are whip dogs and go along with it, or even worse, approve of it on some basis for God knows what reason. So I'm afraid that thinking the way that we do, and I guess most of our listeners do, makes us like genetic mutants. Just generally not a
good survival strategy.
No, we might as well enjoy ourselves, that being the case.
Exactly. Well, that's what we're trying to do. So in any case, unless you have something else to add, Doug, I think we'll just leave it here for today, and then we'll be back on Friday with a viewer Q&A.
Yeah, maybe somebody will ask some, well, they're always interesting questions, so I'm looking forward to it.
They are. So if you'd like to ask a question, the best thing to do is join the Telegram group. In the Telegram group, I'll post a link where you can ask your question, and then we will get to them on Friday. So with that, we'll see you on Friday. Thanks, Doug.
See you then, Matt.